Hello and welcome. So today's talk is losing all my friends on the lonely path to awakening. It's such an interesting idea what a friend is. What is a friend? So we have this friend seemingly in the head that's narrating, and we think that's who we are, this one that's chatting away saying, oh, I don't like them, I like that, look at that dress she's wearing, she's worn that 10 times before, does she never get changed? So that one that's yabbering in your head is kind of like a friend. Most people think that that one that's talking away is who they are, but if you really pay attention to your experience, you'll notice that there is something that knows that voice. So there's something prior to that voice. There's something conscious of that voice. And who is that that's conscious of that voice? Which is really fascinating. And then we seemingly have friends out there in forms of different humans. So we've got friends we made from school, or friends we made at yoga class, or whatever. This idea of friends. And what is that intimacy that you feel with people? It's so interesting. A lot of the time, I think what happens in friendship is there's reciprocity going on. So our systems as humans are set up to enact reciprocity with other people. So it's like, I give you a bit of corn, you give me a bit of flour. I give you some vegetables, you give me some bread. And it's the same with conversation, even though we don't really realize that's what's happening. Unconsciously, we realize that's what's happening. So when we're conversing with people, I feel the people that we like and we call friends are not just ones that we are stuck in a certain situation with or have experiences with, but also ones that are validating how we see the world, how we see our problems, and how we want to be seen by others. So they validate that. So for example, you tell them a story about how terrible your husband has been to you, and they validate that, they console you, and they say that must be awful, and I'm so sorry to hear that, and what an asshole he is. And then you do the same for them, and this vice versa. And you're kind of consoling each other about each other's life. And that can also be on the spiritual path. And I'm not saying that that's unhealthy or that you shouldn't do it, but it's a really interesting phenomena that most of our friendships exist in words and in stories that we're telling. So if you got a bump on the head and you were no longer able to speak or communicate in the way in which we communicate, what would friendship look like then? If you couldn't use words, friendship would be more about like a solidarity of doing things together. So like a dog, if you had a dog, there's a solidarity of going walking, laying on the sofa together. Maybe you speak to them, but they don't speak back to you. And you interpret them, but there's this reciprocity, as in, like, as a human, you give the dog love and it gives you love back. It follows you, it protects you, it keeps you company. So there's some form of reciprocity, but it doesn't do storytelling. But in the human world, and especially currently now, so much of friendship is about talking. So you meet friends on Zoom or on the phone to talk, or you meet them in person to have coffee and talk, and so much of it is about stories. You validate my story, I validate your story, and then we feel good. We get lots of positive chemicals happening in our body. And I'm sure there's so much more complexity to friendship. But this is one element of friendship, is this reciprocity in storyland that we're doing. So what happens if you begin to fall out of stories and you don't see yourself as stories so much anymore, and you don't need somebody to validate them, to prop you up in that storyland? What begins to happen? What is friendship to you if you don't do that? If you're not validating each other's stories, what happens to your friends if they start telling about how their partner's an asshole? Maybe you go through the spiritual ego for a while and then you begin to try and teach them how it's all your projection, it's not really your partner, it's the way that you see things and da 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 da. But then maybe at some point you begin to lose interest in that because you begin to realize that is a story too. So then you just lose interest in their story and in validating their story, and you don't have new stories to tell. Maybe for a while you're like, yeah, my new story is to try to convince them that I'm enlightened or something, but maybe you begin to lose that. Then what are you to them? Who are you to them? And then there begins to be sometimes, for some people, an existential crisis because they don't know who they are to friends. They go and meet friends and then they're like, who am I? If I'm not my stories, if freedom is found right here, right now, in what I am, then I don't need somebody to validate my stories because they're not real, they're not true. So then there can be a bit of an existential crisis because naturally, as humans, we want security with other people, but we don't know how to be around identified people anymore because the storytelling isn't fun for us. So then friends begin to drop away because maybe you can't fake it anymore. You can't keep pretending that the stories are interesting to you. You'd rather bliss out. You'd rather talk about the beauty in the moment, in God, in how divine all of this is. They're like, she's either lost the plot or very boring. To just talk about how beautiful it is. Like, we don't go to see films to watch someone running through a beautiful flower field or poppy field, like da 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 da. We want drama and action. So if your story is just like, yeah, I'm happy, yeah, this is great, they might think you're competing with them, or they might just be bored. So then you're left with this conundrum that we have an urge to share and to be with other humans, but we can't play this game of being someone anymore because there's such a deep knowing where it's becoming deeper and deeper, this knowing that who you are is infinite freedom right now, and everything you need and want is here now, and you don't see them as a story anymore, and you don't see that yourself as a story anymore. So every story they tell you is just not true. What you're seeing them as is infinite freedom, as infinite consciousness, as peace, as surrender, as love. And to me, there's two things. Like, in one way, friendship is illusory because who are you friends with? Who do you imagine your friend is? Who are they? So in a way, everything that you think about them, everything you like or don't like about them, everything you want from them isn't true. If you see your friend as anything, if you see your friend as something, you're not seeing them. You're seeing your idea of them. If you believe the stories they're telling you, you're believing the illusion. It's not that that's not their perspective, so you can validate that, but it's not true either. So maybe they're telling you about like how this went wrong the other day and that went wrong. That's from their place of their agenda. They want to tell the story about how this went wrong and that went wrong to hold up their ego because they want to be a victim, or they want to be saved, or they want you to feel sorry for them, or they want to let off steam to you, but that's not who they are. So you can listen and you can hear it if you feel to do that, but that isn't who they are. Who they are is infinite freedom, and every time you see them as a story, you're not seeing them. There can be common interests that are left after the storytelling. So it might be common interests, like an interest in psychology or an interest in deconstructing things or something like this, talking about things more abstractly or maybe vaguely in politics. But mostly it's the interest just is not there. So then the friendship becomes more about doing things together, which is the way it most probably was like 500 years ago, when there wasn't such much social media and words. You lived in these communities and then you did things together, you worked together, and there wasn't such friendship based on stories. You didn't have to be like, oh, and today I picked this and did that, because you'd done it kind of together. And like before words, you were just living and working together in silence. You weren't retelling the story of who you were all the time. Like if you live in a community day in, day out, you don't have the need to keep retelling the story of yourself. But when you're kind of like darted all around the globe and just meeting someone for an hour and a half or 2 hours or something, then you want to present something. But even when you're living in a community, you're trying to present something as well. But what are you if you don't present anything? If you don't believe the other person and you don't present anything? I found what often begins to happen for me, but I can't guarantee this because life is so complex and so divine, and I don't want to make any claims about myself, because as soon as you make claims about yourself, often it goes and contradicts itself. But I often find that when you get more and more empty, you just become a mirror of the other person. So if the other person is being sassy, then maybe you become sassy. Or maybe you don't become sassy, but you just feel the energy of sassiness. Like, so you're just empty and you're just picking up the energy that's in front of you. If the other person becomes angry, then you pick up the energy of anger. But actually in yourself, you maybe don't have so much. You just look. But to other people, you don't look like an empty void. You look full of personality. Some people say that you just become a mirror. Yeah. But for some people, maybe this talk is a bit too advanced. Maybe you're still looking at who you are and recognizing who you are right now. Who are you? Who are you? Who is the other and who are you? And I'll give you a tip. It's not about storyline. You're not found in stories. Who you are is not something you can tell the other person, and who they are is not something they can tell you. But we become so hypnotized by stories. We're like, oh yeah, oh yeah. But then you realize that sometimes other people are telling you stories about themselves, and then suddenly you cotton on like, that's not true. Like you see them in that circumstance and you're like, they're not the victim in that circumstance, they're being an asshole. They're like saying how their partner's an asshole, but they're being the asshole. We're so fascinating as humans. Yeah, so if you have like intense shame, for example, just to show you the mechanism of how it happens. So if you have intense shame, sometimes if somebody does something like cleans the house, it might trigger shame in you. So then you might feel like they've done something to me. They've cleaned the house to make me feel shameful. They've cleaned the house to try to be better than me. They've cleaned the house to do something, and you don't even realize that's happening. You just feel like, and then there is being an asshole to the other person. And the other person might have just cleaned the house because they felt like it, because it was dirty, but they weren't trying to shame you. And if you think of that in like lots of details, like if somebody makes their bed in the morning, and if you don't make your bed in the morning, you're like, who do they think they are? And then to you, you feel like they're attacking you. Like that person is attacking me. And it's so hard to see these dynamics. Like Because it's all about the inside, because maybe the person that makes the bed is trying to be better than you, but maybe they're not, so then it's all about the inside of that other person. Just, it can be, I've worked with people where it's even in the movement, like you move a certain way and the other person thinks you're moving in a certain way because they're doing something wrong, and then they suddenly get aggressive towards you because they think the way you're moving is saying they are bad. Humans are so fascinating. But for you, it's not getting lost in that story of who's right and who's wrong. Understand psychology, understand personality types, understand your personality. But your job is to see beyond it, that none of it is true. Who you are is love in every moment. So when your personality has been like, she's bad, he's bad, it doesn't mean that you don't call other people out, but when it's this internal energy of hatred, of seeking, of rejection, of avoidance, it's noticing this isn't true. This isn't who I am. This isn't my happiness or freedom. Getting them to behave in another way isn't going to free me. It might make things more pleasant. It might make things more painful. But it isn't my freedom. My freedom is who I am, which is presence, beingness, aliveness, that which is infinite. And it's this movement from being a story to being undefined that is the freedom. But that is the absolute terror to the separate self, to be undefined. Who are you right now? Who are you right now? Who is looking? The mind says, I am looking. This is me. This voice is me. But who is looking at that voice? Who is experiencing right now? What is beyond the noise of you? You're not looking for a place. It's no place, but it's who you are. It's deeply known. We can call it the big consciousness and beingness, but eventually we can throw those words away, and then we can say nothing and everything. If you need something to latch onto, that's okay, that can help calm the mind. The places to look are the personalized consciousness and the personalized beingness, which is the I am. So the feeling of the I am and the personalized consciousness. And what I mean by personal consciousness is the attention, is the ability to move the attention. And this, if you need something to do or to hold on to, this is the direction to go, because that personalized consciousness, if you keep going into it, it goes to the infinite consciousness. The same with the I am, the beingness, which is all places and no places. Yeah. When it's not love, it is illusion. Love is your nature. So if we go to Nisargadatta Maharaj, the neti path of not this, not that, if it's not love, then it's illusion. Okay, thank you to everybody on YouTube. If you want to join these talks, then you can find out in the box below how to do that. If you go into my website and onto the live stream page, then you'll find out how to join these small talks. Yeah. So I'm going to stop recording now, but the people that are in Zoom can carry on and ask questions. Yeah. Thank you, everybody in YouTube. I really, really, really wish you everything. Not one or two or three things, but every goddamn thing. Yeah. Bye.